PSA just jacked up prices and increased turnaround times this morning, and I'm going to walk through why it's a massive strategic mistake for them and why it's actually a tax on the entire hobby. I'm going to come up with some solutions that maybe PSA will actually listen to, and hopefully at the end we can kind of make a decision on whether we even want to use them based on this. So as you can see in the chart here, everything has increased, the turnaround times increased, they've merged some, and the problem here is I don't think Nat Turner has taken a macroeconomic course in a long time because they are operating on a microeconomic level. What's happening is they're like, oh crap, we have more demand. Ooh, geez, these graders, they are like, kind of hard to find, and we do pay them a lot, and it's all super secret, and it takes 3 months to even like onboard one for like new cards. So that kind of sucks. Can't really get graders. Research and ID, we're using AI for the last 5 years. Didn't tell anybody, but we are. That's why the minimum size is up. But okay, can't really do much there. So, all right, what are the only two levers that we can pull? Lever number one is prices, and lever number two is turnaround times. That's all they've got. That's short-term stuff. So if they get swamped, but I'm going to tell them other options. There are actually other ways, and I'll talk about it at the end. So what'll happen is they'll oscillate. They'll hit the red zone. This accelerometer. They're just running so hot, like a 1942 wartime factory making engines for aircrafts. They hit that, boop, they bounce because they jack prices up or whatever. Then they do the same thing again, and they just oscillate and grow over time because they're at capacity because they need that M&A event to happen imminently. So more is the only answer. Problem is they're not thinking about the macro impacts of this. PSA owns 92% of grading, so they are grading. The only close equivalent I can come up with is oil. And if the oil prices increase, it's actually quite disastrous for the economy because almost the entire economy runs on oil. Food, transportation, healthcare, manufacturing, everything, you name it. And that's why we have a strategic petroleum reserve. So when we need it, we release more oil into the system, ease the prices, because as a country, we rely on this infrastructure. And what effectively happens with commodities like oil, when they go up and they're used ubiquitously, it's a tax on everything, on down from cars to bread. And that is what PSA is doing. If you keep submitting to them, you are accepting the fact that PSA, without any judge, jury, or executioner, or government, or anything like that, they are allowed to say, we are raising prices, and those prices tax the entire hobby. They trickle down the prices of the slabs. Now it trickles down to eBay, to card shows, to your pockets, to do anything with these cards, to repacks, to everything, every single thing in this ecosystem. So thanks, PSA. Nice work. Because they think in micro terms. There are better ways to do this, and I'm going to talk about it at the end. Some of this is our fault as a hobby. We think it's fun to have FOMO, these release cycles and FOMO. And what happens when you do that is you have unpredictable demand curves. And so Ryan was on, president of PSA, he was on Neo's show this morning, and he said, hey, we can't invest tens of millions of dollars in new facilities or manufacturing if we don't know if the demand's going to be there. Because, this Pokemon, he's not sure if this is sustainable because of how insane we are as collectors with demand curves. I mean, these demand curves would give anyone, any economist would barf if he saw these. And so what happens is PSA is like, geez, I don't really want to hire 100 graders because, what if the Pokemon train stops tomorrow? We're the ones holding the bag. But I'm going to call BS on that. So yes, it's our fault that we are a FOMO-driven, modern card market. I'm a vintage guy. It's not as much FOMO there, obviously, but a little bit of BS here. PSA, let's say they, a grader works 8 hours a day, and they pay a grader $20 an hour. They're paying them whatever, $300, $400 a day, $500 a day, depending on the shift and stuff like that. And the grader's doing 6 or 7, let's call it 1,000 cards a day. they're making like they're making like 10 grand in revenue off that grader. And yes, I am well aware about the cost accounting method for all the geeks that want to get in the comments. I realize there's R&D. I realize there's variable expenses that are an equation there. But you can't come to the comments and tell me that PSA's margins are less than 40%. No effing chance. They are at least 40%. So take some of those goddamn margins, those 40% margins that they're getting fat off of, and maybe just take a gamble on facilities. Now, obviously, they did the thing in Germany. They're looking overseas, but they need to add infrastructure. They have to, or we're going to have the same friggin' problem every time something pops, like One Piece or whatever the hell else comes next. TCG, sports cards, everything. They've got to build for the long term because they chose this. We didn't do this. They bought Beckett. They bought SGC. We didn't do that. They have chosen to own 92% of grading, so heavy is the head that holds the crown. It is your job, PSA, to now invest in our hobby so that you don't tax us every time you can't handle the demand, which is very easy to predict, by the way. Just go to a card show. You might want to get some runners. You know those ones that work for like music companies or even Starbucks, for example. Starbucks will do research on zip codes. This is a fun fact if you're a real estate investor. If you see a new Starbucks go up in a neighborhood, buy real estate in that neighborhood because they have advanced metrics that look at all the stuff going on. If Starbucks can do it, PSA can do it. You can look at advanced metrics and understand and poll people and figure out what the hell's going to happen in the hobby. So it's your fault if you don't get it right. So that's, they need to invest more there. They need a time machine to go back in time and hire more graders. It is possible. There are a lot of people that like sports cards and don't mind looking at 1,000 cards a day. I'd rather kill myself. But, I don't know. I have ADD, so I wouldn't want to stare at 1,000 cards a day. But some people really like that. So get some more of them. Anybody on here want a job at PSA? Leave a comment. If you would be willing to be a grader at PSA, who knows? Maybe they'll use this as a recruiting tool or something like that. But they won't trust anybody because I'll just talk to you after you join. Here's some solutions. Now, if one of the things they could do, now somebody left a comment, Dave Sports Cards on Instagram, he said well, why don't they just charge you up front? Could you imagine? Would you submit as much to PSA if they charged you up front? That is an interesting thing because right now it's free money. You're like buying a gift card and you haven't used the gift card yet. So they have this this system where you don't pay until it's graded. And I agree with that. But with what they could do in the future, this would really F up demand. They could just crimp up demand this way. They charge up front the whole thing, or even half up front, like a contractor that works on your house or paints a room for you or whatever. Half up front, half when the job's done. Some variation of that. Sometimes there's maybe it's 25% up front, 25% after research and ID, 25% after it hits Q&A, and 25% when it gets to your house or something like that. Maybe they need to spread that out more. And that will cause people to think about their submissions and maybe reduce the number of just kind of swag, like just guessing, like here's 100 cards, I'm just hoping for the best on some recent TCG. If they charged something immediately, that might help there. That helps on a micro and a macro level. And the other thing I would say is that they could have sub tiers, like within value, you could pay an extra $5 for grader's notes or an extra $5 to shave a few weeks off. So it's not just like a harsh Qbert like stepladder approach to pricing. It's more of a much better curve that actually captures the demand a little bit better. Like right now it's a step. You don't necessarily want to be in that next tier, but you don't want to be in the lower tier and you're in the middle and you're kind of stuck. Which one do I do? They could capture more economic value if they have a curve, and that would require more tiers and more steps, probably a little more work there, but I think the curves would be a little smoother. That's just my idea. And hell, this last comment's going to be cheeky how I'm going to close this down. If you own 92% of the market, you're basically communist Russia at its peak, okay? I'm sorry, PSA, I'm going to pick on you here. And you know what? Buy that manufacturing facility for $10 million. And if the demand goes down, don't worry. You're communist Russia. You'll find a use. get one of the the old aristocrats in the communist regime, like that type of style, like make it your house. I don't know, do something with it. You'll find a way. Somebody will go there and do something, organize papers. You'll find a way to use the facility. Just like Russia, you'll find a way to use that space in some BS way. So once again, I want to thank PSA for choosing to own 92% of the grading market. And PSA, all of us thank you very much for putting in a tax on the entire hobby once again. And they ain't done, folks. They'll do it 1 or 2 more times this year. Book it. Thanks, everyone.